This episode of Jack is brought to you by Weaver Leather.
So while I'm standing here letting him rest, it's interesting to notice that he's got me positioned on his on side. The on side would be the horse's. If you were the horse, it'd be his left side, but it's also the side that we would mount from. So most people mount from this side over here, and it's kind of odd. The reason people mount from this side, the on side, is because way back when knights were riding with swords, most people are right-handed, so most swords were sheathed over here on your left side so you could draw it out and use it. So when you went to mount your horse, you've got this sword hanging down here, so you would swing your right leg over. You would swing your right leg over, and so that's how we ended up with on-side and off-side. But if you watch him, he tends to put me right here. I'm fairly straight, but he's got his head just to my left, which puts me on his on-side. And if you watch, that's a consistent theme he's got going. He's comfortable with me on this side, the on-side. So then we just call the other side the off-side. Even though that could be taken as curiosity, it's too aggressive. He's blowing when he's headed at me. He's really big, he's really fresh, he's licking and chewing, we're moving around here, but you know, he's a big, strong horse. I did not take him out today and lunge him, I didn't run him around. And this is where, if you have the round pen set up, the round pen can give you the advantage of being able to move him around, but some people don't have a round pen, so I'll do some of both with him without the round pen. He's getting sweaty. It's the first 60-degree day we've had. And there's some nerves here too. He's much better to this side. You'll notice I'm not making him go full circles. I'm not making him go full circles around me. Half circles are a good start, especially when he stays a little bit lighter. He's light on the rope until he, just pulls for little reasons. But he's staying pretty light with me, so I can start here. In a few days, that'll give me a full lunge circle. That's the side that he's not comfortable with me on, and I wasn't actually asking him to go that way, so it's actually interesting that he decided to go that way at all, because I hadn't asked him to go that direction, but he volunteered it because I have asked him 4 or 5 times in the past. So he's thinking. So I'm watching him learn. Even though he's so full of himself, he's still learning, licking, chewing. That cracks me up because Roxy did so much of it. He noticed me switch the stick and string, and so he went ahead and went this direction. So you can see the beginning of lunging happening here. If he were pulling on me more of the time, I would need to disengage his hip. Eventually, we need to be able to disengage his hip, and I'll go into that on another day. I need to be able to keep him out of my space, which I am able to do. I need to be able to have him get to turn and face me, and right now I'm basically using pressure on the rope to get him to turn and face me. He's so big, if he was not responding to the rope halter and rope, that I would need to disengage the hip with the stick and string, but he's responding, so that's why I'm opting not to really focus on that a lot at the moment. I'm also, it should be noted, I'm in a controlled environment. So the arena's all closed up, so even though he's big and I could lose him, nothing bad's going to happen. Again, this is just us learning to communicate with each other. He's learning some very basic language. And it's interesting to watch all their habits when they're this young, because whether it's the head tossing or the tail flipping or the licking and chewing, a lot of them, or the pawing, a lot of them are little quirky habits that they might keep into their training, so I start to make note of them now. Meaning if you've got one that throws its head a lot now, don't be surprised when you start riding it if it throws its head a lot, because it's been telling you all along it wants to toss its head. If they're real bad with their tail now, you can't blame it on my legs because he's never been ridden before. But it could be just the way he expresses himself. Again, this is just more of us talking. This is just more of us talking. Like, he's not real comfortable standing still because he's got a whole bunch of energy. But he moves towards me, I move towards him. We're just having a conversation. It's interesting to watch him with his mouth because he's not really used to the pressure on the halter. So you'll see him opening his mouth like that right there. It's actually happening while he's in motion. It's happening when he pulls on the halter. So what's interesting to me is that when you have horses that they're just not used to pressure on the halter, that's still the reason I'm not going to tie him. Any pressure on his head, even if it's not a bridle, even if it's not a bit in his mouth on a bridle, he still opens his mouth. So it's interesting because when he gets bridled, I would expect him to do that. Very good lateral motion. I'm not asking for him to do that fancy of a move, but I won't complain if he gives me something that's way more advanced. So even though that technically could have just been him lunging around me, if he wants to side pass facing me, that is 10 times harder than what I'm asking for, but I won't punish him for it because it's going to make my job easier later. But it's interesting because it shows you how strongly he wants to face me. Because he so strongly wants to face me that he opts to side pass, which is much more advanced, which I like. I like that he's this interested. Now you're starting to see shifted gears a little bit. If you watch him, like his ears are just a little more focused. He just has it's a bad angle because you're kind of looking at his behind, but he's just got a little more of a serious look, like he's thinking. He just shifted into like a low gear where he's trying to figure this out. And so this is a really good time where, and then now you start seeing the licking and chewing. This is where I can either rest him, it's a good place to end, or if I'm feeling like he's really open-minded, it's not a bad place after I've rested him for a minute to introduce a new idea. You just saw that deep breath there. So yesterday I had introduced the idea of the stick and string being an extension of my body. So since he's standing here like this, I think I might take this opportunity to just go ahead and show him that this stick and string's not going to hurt him, and I'm just going to move it around a little bit. And now I'm going to move both of our feet around so that he's not feeling quite as trapped. But if you watch, I'm going to be moving that stick and string, and it'll be getting closer to him and then away. And it's just kind of going to move around until he notices that it's not really such a big deal. Right there, it brushed across him. And now I'll give him just a minute to think, okay, it touched me and I didn't die. And then there he's still, which again, I'm glad he's being respectful, but I reached out and there I touched him again. He trotted forward, but I'm okay. I mean, if he was a human and he was scared of spiders, it's not like I'm going to tie his feet still and then tie you to a chair and then stick spiders on you. If he wants to walk around, he's kind of scared of this. I move it closer, he kind of cringes. I take it away. Eventually, he's going to get quiet to this stick and string to where he's going to realize it's actually not hurting him. It's not really doing much of anything. And then what's nice will be when I can rub him with it, because when I can rub him with it, that's when he'll understand that it's not always used to move him. Now, what also is interesting is that while I'm trying to introduce this to him, do you see how we've achieved lunging? He's lunging around me, which is what we were going after earlier, but in this less direct route of me walking around, and because he has a lot of draw towards me, that desire to be near me, it's actually morphed into lunging. There's him kind of rearing because he's like, that's a little too close. He's still not confident. Now what's interesting is the further back I touch him, if I try to touch him up near his neck, head, and shoulders, he's more likely to rear or run away. If I touch him in the middle, around where the saddle would go, he's more likely to maybe side pass away, and if I touch him on the rear end, he's more likely to kick. So when I'm going around like this, I kind of wave it around at different spots, but I'd ideally touch him somewhere in there because he's more likely to flinch. When I go up in here, you tend to see him rear more. When I go back in here, I haven't because I don't really want to get him kicking at me. He is kind of big. So there, I actually got it on him, and you should be able to see it peeking up over his back, and I'm rubbing him with it. It just occurred to him, I'm not making him move, and it just occurred to him that it'd be easier if we just stood still. This isn't actually hurting him. And now again, while I'm rubbing him, he's having another one of those kind of aha moments. He's like, it's very strange, but I think this is trying to communicate with me. I think this human is trying to talk to me. And he's sitting here contemplating that. Notice he's not pawing. Notice his ears are really focused. They're back, meaning they were rotated back towards his back because he's focused on that stick and string, but they do rotate forward, and if I move my hand, his ears rotate forward so that you can see where his mind is going, back to the stick and string, up to me. So there, you can see him flinch a little bit and lean away, but he's going, okay, this thing's not trying to hurt me. But this is his on side, the side we would mount. Okay, so I'm going to do vaguely the same thing. I'm going to move over to this side of him. This side's been his worst side, so I'm going to have this rope in 2 hands in case he decides to leap off. But what you should notice right now that's really interesting, I'm going to come back to it because I'm going to reward him. That's one of the first times I've crossed across that midline, the line that would be his spine if it just drew a line straight out his tail and straight out his head. If he were standing straight, he let me walk around to that side, which is the off side, the side he's been scared of me on. So I came back around without asking anything of him. I came over here, went, wow, you're letting me be here. I think I'll leave you alone, instead of adding something else that might scare him. So I'm going to do that a few times before I start trying to touch him. I'm actually going to break his feet free by moving him, by just continuing to walk. Notice how he starts to put me on that on side. He puts his head, there he let me on the off side, but he actually starts to almost act like he's going to do a showmanship type of a pivot or something, because he really would rather have me on this side. So I'm going to speed up, go around him. I'm going to take this stick and string out here. I'm going to make sure I'm not in front of him, because if he leaps forward when this touches him, I don't want to be right in front of him. There's the danger of having him face me so strongly. So I might be more willing, this is how you can see that he's sticky to have me back over here. He doesn't really want me back on this side all that much. So I might use his fear of the stick and string to my advantage by holding it up there, which is going to send him forward. Now he went forward, soft, light, wasn't pulling on me. That's why I'm going to stop and let him get a reward there. He's blowing, he's trying to figure out why I stopped. He might connect the dots that he stopped because I stopped because of the way he was moving. And if he does have that thought, then the next time I do it, next time I go around there, he'll repeat that action again. He's very aware. If you can see the ear that's away from me, if I wiggle that stick and string, you can see that ear follow the stick and string, and I'm barely moving it. Okay, more walking. Touch him. That was an unfortunate coincidence. Something like snow clumps or something fell off the outside of the barn over there and jumped him right as I was getting ready to touch him with the stick and string. So he jumped. And so it's just one of those, oh well, if something like that happens, just ignore it and keep going. Off to the side. I'm not in front of him in case he decides to jump. He's remembering that the stick and string hasn't hurt him yet, so he's allowing me, even though he's a little jumpy, he's allowing me to rub him. And so even though he's really fresh, that's where I'm going to end with him today. So I'll probably turn him out for a little while because I know he needs to blow off some steam and run around and take a recess break, but I'm not interested in being attached to him while he's doing that. So I'm going to go find a place to turn him out and let him blow off steam, and I'm going to be happy that he came this far, that I can touch him on both sides with the stick and string, and tomorrow it'll be really interesting to see how he does. I'm going to back him out of my space just a little bit there, because as he gets more quiet, it's important he stays respectful of my space because he's big.
Join us next time for another episode of Jacs.